as we meet parents, students' parents, or candidates' parents, and as they ask the question that how do you think aviation is for future, and is there a guarantee of getting a job?
Yeah.
Okay, so when that happens, right?
Welcome to India's #1 pilot podcast on episode number 21 of Pilot Podcast. Hope all are well, and here we are. So it's been almost a month that I'm not flying, and I have really started missing flying. When you are actually there in the cockpit, a lot of pilots, you would hear them saying that yes, flying is getting too hectic, and that's one of the thing to discuss, that it is so much. My roster is 90 hours or 95, 100 hours. I'm flying so much back to back on minimum rest, this and that. And yes, it is that way when you get to fly. But when you don't get to fly and when you're deprived of it, that's the time you really understand the value of it. And I knew that this is coming to me, and because I knew that situation is getting really worse with flying, and hence I knew this is going to be, just for a few months at least, this is going to be my last flight. Okay, so it was Dubai layover and then followed by Calicut. It was a 3-day pattern, and then I was like, okay, these layovers which are there, and you get to stay in these 5-star hotels, and you get to explore different places. So every week you have a layover at a different place.
Correct.
So you get to explore all these places, and it's a change from your routine.
Absolutely.
And I was going to, think that yes, for next few weeks or months, I will be out of it. And that was something I was going to miss,
Yes,
so now that is the time it's happening. I just hope that we get back, as soon as possible.
Right.
So hopefully in a month or month and a half, we'll be doing medical again, which is going to be special medical, and then hope to get back to skies again.
Yeah, so it has finally hit you now that
Yes.
that you miss flying, right?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
we also miss flying because
For sure.
I mean, on the
What was
day,
your last flight, and how was that experience?
last flight was a check, the
Yeah.
conversion check, right?
Right.
So we did, like, the moment we are done with the last flight, we would directly miss, we are not going to fly the multi again, or we don't know when would be flying multi for
Right,
general aviation,
right.
like the DA42. Same with our solo flights when
For
we
sure.
were training in the
Yeah,
US, right?
yeah.
So the last solo flight, be it the day and the night, both flights we would be like, wow, this was an amazing flight. And then you wish you had one more flight for
Yeah.
Yes.
solo to go to some other place.
Correct.
Yeah, we are waiting for our license in the past 2 to 3 months. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
the process is taking
Yeah,
a while,
it's
but
taking some time.
we are eager to get back to the skies again.
Correct.
Okay, after we are done with the type rating.
My best wishes for the same.
Thank you.
There is something.
But you will definitely be enjoying the next step in your process. So
For sure.
now
Yes,
you
yes.
would be flying multi. Now from here, when you will go for your type rating, you would feel so good.
Correct.
And
Yes.
it's always good to, fly the higher aircraft of the higher, jet engine. Now you'll be flying. So with so many advanced instruments around you,
Correct.
and then that will be, you will definitely enjoy
Yes,
it. So
and study the whole new Airbus.
yes, absolutely.
The
Yes.
huge plane.
Yeah.
All the systems.
And that's so not only applicable to two of us, but everyone that is holding CPL
Yes.
and getting their type rating right
Absolutely,
now,
yes,
and
yes,
looking to get into airline. Definitely, there
Absolutely,
are so
yes.
many opportunities right now that
Absolutely. The opportunities are growing at exponential rate at the moment.
Correct.
A lot of people are asking that what is the opportunity now. So it's absolutely bright. You ask anyone, everyone would say, if you think of becoming a pilot, and
Yeah.
if you have all those criterias checked, tick marked, like we have discussed that in
Yeah.
our videos and
yeah,
previous
absolutely.
podcast, like 12th with physics and maths,
Correct.
financial background, and those things, if they are in place,
Correct.
then this is the right time. There can't be better time than this.
For sure.
So-
I would term it as the golden era of
Yeah.
aviation.
Yes,
So
Yeah.
if
absolutely.
anyone wants to become a pilot, this is the right time to start.
Correct.
Right time to start the training. If someone is holding a CPL, either get the type rating or they can also wait for the CPL holder vacancy.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Yes.
So, as we meet parents, students' parents, or candidates' parents, and as they ask the question that how do you think aviation is for future, and is there a guarantee of getting a job?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so when that happens, right now there are parameters that with the help of those parameters we can predict in future that most likely for next 5 years there is gonna be a huge demand of pilots.
Absolutely.
Yes.
500 airplanes if we consider coming in 5 to 6 years, that means 1,000 pilots required to be recruited every single
Yeah.
year,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
For 100 airplanes,
Absolutely.
1,000 pilots are recruited every single year. Now, those many are only CPLs issued every single year. Then there's still a deficit for places like private jet pilots, and there is a place for instructors. So again, coming to a point which actually is not on agenda of today's podcast, but students who have money to do CPL training
Mhm.
but don't have money to do type
Type
rating,
Hmm.
they can look forward to becoming an instructor in today's date. But again, if someone wants to be an instructor in India, then that person should do flying from India. If that person doesn't have money for type rating, airline training, and all of those things, then that person can just do CPL. Okay, probably pay how much additional 5 to
5 to 8 lakh rupees for patter flying,
Patter
which
flying.
is required to become
AFI.
AFI.
Right? Yeah.
And once they become AFI, they can work towards building their hours and get an ATPL.
Correct.
In meanwhile, like
So
let's
after
say
AFI, there is FI,
yes,
right?
FI.
AFIR, FIR, and thereafter is deputy
Deputy.
CFI and CFI.
So deputy CFI also has the same,
Has the same license
as CFI, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Correct. Because you have flown from India, so you
Yes.
know the instructor's designations in
Assistant flight instructor rating is AFIR, then flight instructor rating, that is FIR,
Correct.
then chief flight instructor rating. So
Correct.
yeah, there are certain hour requirements for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So
we'll
we-
get
yeah.
some instructor on podcast as well, so they
Yes.
can go
Share their
like
In the
details.
detail.
CPL commercial flying flight instructors who fly for flight schools in India. We'll
Yes,
get someone on board and yeah, they can go into details of this.
Absolutely.
But if someone is not having money for the remaining part of, which is almost same as the cost of CPL, almost same as the cost of little bit lesser.
Than that.
Lesser.
I would say around 15 to 20 lakh rupees.
Correct,
Because
correct.
10 to 12 lakh rupees is for the type rating.
Yeah.
And then once you go for the airline, it would be 10 to 15 lakh for the
Absolutely.
line training, depending on the airline.
Absolutely. Yeah, so definitely we hear from many students that they have money for CPL, okay, but they don't have money for type rating. So in that case, this is a really good way to move forward if that person is dedicated to become a pilot, right?
Yes. So if one wants to start with the pilot training and has money for CPL, only for CPL, let's say it takes around 40 to 45 lakh rupees
Yeah.
to get their CPL
Let's
training
consider
done.
45.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, 45 lakh rupees to get their training done for
Hmm.
CPL from India. Okay. So once he's done with CPL, okay, after that, once he starts his or her training to become a flight instructor,
Correct.
additionally 5 to 8 lakh rupees would be required for patter flying to become an AFI. Once the patter flying is done, he or she becomes an AFI and start instructing students. and start building their hours. So
Correct.
in I would say around 2 to 3 years, they would
Correct.
gain around 1500 hours, and then they can apply for ATPL and then move to the airlines.
Correct.
So in the span of that 2 to 3 years, they
Yeah.
would be earning money as well,
Yeah.
which they can save for their type rating.
Absolutely.
And if someone is doing their instructor rating from a particular FTO, okay, they might also have the provision of getting some benefits to go for the TR.
Sure.
So they can save then money for type rating as well as for airline training,
Correct.
which if you sum it up, then that comes out to be about 25 to 30 lakhs. Sometimes
Correct.
depends, it can go
Correct.
max to about 35 lakhs also.
Yeah.
So that way they will be able to, gather
Including
that amount.
type rating, right?
Including type
Yeah.
rating and then
And
airline
airline
training
training, yeah.
together. Okay. So that way they can go for the further process.
Correct.
Considering their age and all those factors.
Yes, because because on our YouTube channel, on our Instagram, we get questions from many students how to arrange funds for their
Yeah.
training. So now if someone is short on the funds, okay, so they can, if they want to become a pilot, then this is a right way to become a pilot.
So it is pretty much that a person pays by time than paying by money, because then the path to the airline is relatively longer, right? But the person can become a flight instructor and then do all of this.
Correct.
That is how it can be done. Again, all this happens when there is demand for pilots, because now all the instructors that are right now working in most of the flight schools will soon be joining airlines, one or the other.
They are already joining airlines, and now
Okay.
flight schools are getting short of instructors.
Correct.
So they are again hiring instructors. The
Correct.
CPL holders, if not an airline immediately because of some or the other reason, like they don't have sufficient funds for type rating
Correct.
or whatever it is, then they can start with instructor rating.
So that creates
So-
a void of human resources for a place that is instructors, flight
Correct,
instructors,
correct,
because India is actually, Indian flight schools and Indian aviation is strongly investing on training also, pilot training also.
Yes.
So that is focus. So that is part of skill development program of India, right?
Correct,
By the PM. And
Correct.
apart from that, it's also part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat, because if
Correct.
we build our own pilots, as we know, pilot training is expensive. The money doesn't go out of India and it
Correct,
stays in India, builds more employment in India, the revenue in India, and all of those
Correct.
things.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
back in time, what used to happen was the instructor salaries were too low. So let's
Yes.
shed a little bit light on what are current instructor salaries.
Flight instructor salaries.
Light
Yes. So
they're not
earlier-
so light, they're heavy right now.
Earlier, flight instructor salaries used to start from somewhere around 25,000 to 30,000. But nowadays, if you consider just assistant flight instructor, then also that salary starts from 50 onwards.
That's
Yeah,
great.
60,000,
So
50,000.
depending on
for-
flight school, it will
Correct.
vary. So 50K plus, and
Correct.
then as you build few hours, like around 300 plus hours as assistant flight instructor, and you are eligible to become FIR. And if you clear that DGCA exam, then you become a flight instructor.
Correct.
And then the salary increases; it becomes even more than a lakh, 1.5 lakhs
Correct.
or more.
Correct.
So these salaries are also good enough to sustain.
There are
for-
flight schools
yeah.
that pay more than 2 lakhs to FI also.
Depends on
It
flight
depends
school,
on
as I
flight
said
school.
again.
Yeah.
Yes.
So these are the average salaries, and plus, if you see, as you upgrade more and more, you continue to fly and become deputy chief flight instructor, it becomes more than 3 lakhs also.
Correct.
Okay, so for chief flight instructor, around 4 to 5. So it is a good salary to just start your career with, and then as you want to still continue to be an airline pilot, then as soon as you get an opportunity, you can switch.
Absolutely.
That way you can continue to build your hours also.
And
You
make
get that
money as
skill
well, yeah.
also of
Yeah.
flying well, and you get to go to different fields and get some exposure of
Correct.
filing flight plans and then
Correct.
guiding students and then what all
Correct.
mistakes they can do and
Correct.
those things. Okay,
Absolutely.
so that is also one way.
Yeah, with that said,
Mm.
like to become a flight instructor, also you have to give certain exams.
Mm.
You
Sure.
have to give an interview to become a flight instructor.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just join to get a CPL and don't work on yourself, you don't have the right attitude, okay,
Yeah.
it will be difficult to get a job as a flight instructor.
Yeah.
Yes. So from flight instructor, considering a job of an airline pilot, when the
Mhm.
switch happens,
Yes.
that time airlines are very, very selective to such instructors, because whenever it comes to an instructor, there is some attitude developed as authoritating
Correct.
others. Okay.
Correct.
Which shouldn't build up to such an extent that you do not take an opinion of others, which is going to
Absolutely.
be very hazardous, because
Yeah.
eventually when you go to an airline, that instructor will be a first officer who has to be very, very calm and composed to understand and listen what senior pilot or a captain is saying and take that opinion into account. So this attitude issues should be under control
Yeah.
when this switch happens.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
Yeah, because
So-
in flight school, the instructors are the one who would be, listened to by students.
Correct.
Yes,
Correct.
yes.
Because if you live that way for too long, then
Mhm.
it so happens that you assume the surroundings to continue
Correct,
in that
correct,
way,
correct,
and continue if someone chooses to continue in this live in same way and behave in same way, then that might not be a welcome in an airline.
Correct,
Because
correct.
whatever the behavioral pattern would be for a say big MNC CEO, that would require different things from a person than what it would require from a pilot or from an accountant or from an engineer, right? So different personalities and different types of behaviors are desirable for different types of careers, correct?
Absolutely.
So same way, if we dive deep into pilot career itself, then maybe an Air Force pilot would have different personality and decision making framework
Correct,
that would
correct.
be required. An airline pilot would think and behave in a different way, and a flight school instructor would again think and behave in a different way, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk about personalities a little bit. Sounds good?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
If we dive deep into pilots' personality traits, and if we dive deep into hazardous attitudes for pilots, let's talk about that,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Because when it comes to a single person making a decision, that time the perspective is different. It is making a decision by that person himself and then giving orders to his subordinates. Whereas when it comes to group decision making, like in a cockpit, that time the attitude needs to be different. A pilot should be able to receive the information from others as well as should be able to, depending on his ability and role and depending on his status, whether he's a captain or a first officer, should be able to make a collective decision. So these things differ when it is a single man cockpit, like when you do it in a cross country, and depending on situation, these things
Correct.
would vary.
Multi-crew cockpit and
Yes,
single crew cockpit.
yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
So-
most airplanes that we used to fly were single crew cockpit, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So let's discuss about what are the hazardous attitudes, which attitudes, if you think that any pilot is developing, then you can watch it yourself and then try to get rid of
Yeah.
those.
This matters a lot to the airline
Yes.
assessments
Yes.
as well,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So for the ones who are CPL holders and or type rated pilots right now appearing for airlines, pay like proper attention to this topic, and more than that, be self-aware, right?
So, for example, if a pilot is flying on the same route again and again, okay, so there's a human tendency to become complacent,
Correct.
okay, and he or she will assume that the flight would be operating as per each and every day. So till date, there hasn't been any problem for the flight. Okay, so then on some day, if something happens, he or she should be ready for it. So he should not have the mentality that this cannot happen to me. So as a pilot, that is a hazardous attitude, which is called as invulnerability, which states that it could not happen to me. So any incident, any accident can happen to you. So you have to be ready to take action to stop that accident from being happening.
Correct. Yeah. So also in some of the podcast, I guess we discussed about the authority gradient. So when an instructor student authority gradient is considered, the instructor is way too high because of the experience and knowledge of the instructor and skills, obviously. And a student who has flown like 10 hours has only 10 hours on his logbook. The authority gradient is steep, right? Now, when it comes to airlines, usually the authority gradient is not that steep, right?
Unless a pilot is under training.
Correct.
Sometimes whenever the junior first officer was under training and there is a trainer, then definitely there are many things a junior first officer has to learn.
Correct.
That time it could get authoritative at one point of time.
Okay.
If he is well prepared and if he is doing his duties correctly, then still for his or her stage, the captain would understand that yes, he is doing it okay, fine.
Correct.
Then it becomes a synergistic cockpit. But
Correct.
at the time of emergency, when a captain is the one who has to handle that situation in the shortest duration of time, that time it is the captain who has to, delegate the actions, and then there is captain will be the pilot flying in that case, and first officer will be pilot monitoring and will be doing the action. So depending on situation, it will vary. In normal situation, if it is a synergistic cockpit, then in emergency situation, it can become authoritative or autocratic cockpit.
Correct. Okay.
So
So as you use the term synergistic cockpit, just tell us more about it, because
synergistic cockpit is where there will be discussion of certain situation. If it is not time critical, then there will be discussion before you make a decision. Thereafter, if in case there is a trainee pilot, then there will be training given to him.
Correct.
It is not order, or it is not something talking in a very rude manner or in a very it's in a polite manner, delivering the knowledge and then implementing it.
Correct.
So that is about synergistic. Synergistic is the ideal cockpit in normal situations.
Having synergy between the
two
crew
members. Yeah. So that is a synergistic cockpit.
Correct.
And then, so when we discussed about...
And what's the opposite of synergistic cockpit?
Synergistic is ideal.
Ideal.
Then authoritative or autocratic is extreme. So, in Middle Eastern as well as Far Eastern countries, like India falls in that, but still now with more implementation of CRM into airline standards, this thing is changing quite a lot. And but still, Far Eastern countries, like if you say Vietnam, then Thailand, then these countries, they still implement is not the correct word, but there is still authoritative cockpit. So even if some captains who go from India to those countries, Far Eastern countries. So I recently met one captain who was there in Bangalore, and I knew him. So recently on a layover, we were just having breakfast together. So he was sharing some stories of airline in Vietnam. So he was like, there I give every sector to first officer when I was here in India. That time I used to give whichever sector possible, like obviously not at places where a first officer is not supposed to land according to the rules. And so there they are very reluctant. First officers are very reluctant and they don't accept any sector. They don't want to take flying as a pilot flying, because they are not used to doing that as much by other captains.
Okay.
So this steep gradient
Yeah.
is there in mainly Asian, Middle Eastern and Far Eastern countries.
Correct.
Whereas in Western Europe and in USA and America, there things are pretty different, where it is much casual with
Yeah.
the standards
Yeah.
in the cockpit. But
Even
when
during
it comes
training,
to,
I would say it is like that in the US with comparison to Indian flight training for sure.
Yes. So there is a point where there has to be a synergy which has
Yes,
to be
yes.
maintained. It shouldn't be
Correct.
so casual that a junior would say anything to his senior.
Definitely.
Okay. Or would just keep chit chatting with them,
Correct.
which has no goal towards the flight.
Correct.
Some random stuff which is at home, which
Absolutely.
has nothing to do with
Absolutely.
flight, which
Yeah.
is not
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Got
going
it.
to lead you to any
Yeah.
conclusion
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
not going to impart you any training
Correct.
or improve your skills for that
Correct.
matter.
Correct.
So that is also not very ideal, which
Yeah.
is known as leisure fare cockpit.
Okay.
Okay. So that is equal, both the crew
Correct.
members at equal stage, where you just take things very, very casually.
Mhm.
So that is not very ideal. Steep gradient is also not ideal.
Correct.
So in case if the captain has made a mistake, then also first officer hesitates to tell
Yeah.
the captain,
Yes,
which is very wrong.
That's
in
exactly
case
what
of
happened in the crash that happened.
Many crashes
In
have happened
Kozhikode
because of this
recently.
kind of attitude. Many
Correct.
crashes have happened because of this steep gradient. Okay.
Correct.
So synergistic is the ideal gradient where
Absolutely.
you think that if anything is going wrong, then first officer would point his view.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And that definitely translates into flight safety, good
Yes,
flight
yes,
safety as well.
absolutely,
Correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because if first officer is so agreeable of the captain's behavior
Right.
at every point of time,
Correct.
then it's a single crew cockpit and only one
Right.
person is making all the decisions, and
Correct.
he or she is never being challenged whether the person is right or wrong. Correct?
Yes,
Sure.
so it's as a pilot, it's important, even if the person is a captain and you are a first officer. So if captain makes a mistake, it's first officer's duty, if he identifies it, to let the captain know in a polite manner, not
Correct.
that he shouts on the captain and makes
Correct.
the cockpit.
Like there are
Yeah.
certain standard callouts. Let's say, for example, approach is unstabilized.
Okay.
Okay. For example, then
Yes.
first officer has to call out approach unstabilized.
Okay.
Okay. Now captain should understand it means he has to go around.
Hmm.
If he doesn't do that, then first officer has to say captain go around.
Okay.
And if he still doesn't say that, then just put thrust levers to toga
Toga.
and then go around.
Correct.
Then you don't
Yes,
get
yes.
it. Then you can't get back from go around phase back to approach phase.
Correct.
Aircraft goes into go around phase anyway. So
Yeah. So
Okay.
pilots are not allowed to or advised against fighting in the cockpit.
yeah. So there are standard terminologies, standard callouts follow that. You can't keep fighting. No, captain, this is not happening. No, now you have to go. You can't keep on
Yes,
fighting
yes.
at that
Correct.
point. Use standard terms and take an action.
Correct.
Okay.
That is how you do, go about any situation.
Correct. That brings a topic that might be relatable to persons who have CPL and are looking to go for airline assessments now. If a situation that you face when you all are partying and you are not drinking and your friends are all drinking and your friends come up and say, Aaj to gaadi tera bhai chalayega, or I'm the one who's gonna drive today. Okay, what's your solution? Do you let the person drive and get out of the vehicle? Do you fight with the person to get on the driving seat? Or the third option is the most creative one, which ideally should be your behavior and should be your decision on that. That is, take the keys, walk away with an auto or with a taxi. The car's gonna be immobile now as you have the keys. Okay, you don't have to fight with the driver, intending driver who is drunk, right? Yeah, just take away that, settle it next day. Simple as that, right?
Yes, when everyone would be sober,
Because
settle it.
yeah, because if you just choose to walk away from the car and you let the person drive, that means the safety of other occupants of the vehicle is jeopardized. Safety of the persons on road, that is jeopardized. So just take the keys, walk away. Simple. Okay, that's smart decision making. And
Absolutely,
yeah. So these are kind of situation based decisions that pilots have to make and pilots do make, and that is why if we look at pilots' personality, pilots strike to be different, right? You just speak with a person, you'll know this person is up to something, or this person is something different, is smart, is concise, and clear in their communication.
So mostly they would be inclined towards taking decision which won't affect the safety of the person, of the aircraft, of anything for that matter, right? And there's one more attitude which I would like to bring up. So let's say there's a student pilot, right? So when we were doing the training, okay, so the moment a person lands a plane, okay, for the first, second, third time, and the landing is good without the assistance of instructor, okay, the confidence is here up, okay, but the experience is low. Okay, so we tend to get into the intuition that we can now land the plane by ourselves, right? So it's like we can do it, but we don't have that experience. We just have learned the skill of landing, right? We need to have like 150 landings to say that we can do it. So that is one of the macho attitude, okay, which pilots tend to develop if they do something good, right?
So in terms of CRM, which is Crew Resource Management, we call it as a GDA model, which is Guide, Direct and Act. So first of all, if anything, be it first officer or a captain, whoever it is, okay, now depending on the role is basically pilot flying and pilot monitoring. So either of the two pilots could be pilot flying. Okay. And the other one is pilot monitoring. So the pilot monitoring has to ensure that pilot flying is doing correct actions. If not, get it to his notice. So that is guide. Like for example, I said, if a first officer says approach unstabilized, okay, so that means the next action has to be go around. Okay. Now, if that is not taken, then direct. So directly tell that what to be done. Captain, go around. That is direct. If not done, act. Put the thrust levers to yoga. That is the way. Because now time is getting critical and you don't have much time. Because if in case you continue that approach, both will be called to the company office and then, or by DGCA, suspension could happen. So it is not one pilot who is at fault. It is other pilot also who who is in the cockpit, who has to, who is active member of the cockpit and who has to get that to notice of the other pilot. Okay. But if in case, let's say, one of the junior first officer, whoever it is landing and then if the landing is screwed up at that point, which is going terribly bad, then there is no point, no way, you don't have time. There is not even 1 second to talk and tell him what to do. Immediately, captain can take over and then land the plane. So that is, it is not necessary that you have to follow the sequence, guide, direct, act. You can directly act also depending on how much time you have left.
It is time sensitive, right? It is very time sensitive.
Yes, and speaking about all of this, like I recollect some parts of a movie Top Gun. Have you watched the movie Top Gun?
I mean, who has not? As an aviation, basically as a pilot, everyone would have watched Top Gun. If you haven't, must watch.
Yes, as an aspiring pilot, if anyone watches that movie, he would be in the wrong attitude to become a pilot, because whatever is shown in the movie may be or may not be applicable to an Air Force pilot, but I would say it's not applicable to a commercial pilot.
Correct. So when we use the term attitude is not that the attitude that we refer to here is not whether a bad attitude, good attitude, and like throwing tantrums at people attitude. That is not the attitude we are talking about. Attitude, what we refer to here is personality traits. Okay, so different pilots professions require them to behave in certain way, like Air Force pilot Maverick, okay, or what was his name?
Captain Pete Mitchell.
Okay.
In the movie?
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's his name was Maverick. Everyone knew him by the name Maverick.
Right.
His actual name was something.
So he was Air Force pilot, and that too an experimental Air Force pilot. He was supposed to do the roles of experimenting new airplanes and doing the missions with a single crew cockpit, right?
Yes.
But if some aspiring pilot decides to behave in that way when that aspiring pilot is training for commercial aviation, then take it with a grain of salt. See that movie as a movie, okay? Not something like you want to behave like that when it comes to your commercial pilot training. If you are an Air Force pilot, we are not anyone's to tell you how to behave, and because that
every
is
role has a different personality trait requirement.
Right?
Definitely.
So we are not the ones to talk anything about Air Force pilot training. That is a completely different ball game, and if we have a chance, we'll invite some Air Force pilots someday, if at all it is possible. If at all it is legal to do it, then yeah, sure, we'd love to have some Air Force pilot on this podcast someday.
Yes.
But what we are talking about is commercial aviation. So if you watch the movie and motivated and inspired by that movie, and now you're like, I'm gonna be the Maverick on Cessna 172. Very, very bad combination. Don't do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that is only applicable if you are a fighter pilot, right? In commercial aviation, you will have to follow each and every rule laid by the government.
Well, we don't know it is even applicable in Air Force pilots or not. We don't know anything about Air Force pilots, to tell you the truth. Yeah.
But it's not applicable for the commercial aviation.
Yeah, for sure it is not applicable,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So, like breaking the rules, the aircraft limitation was, say, whatever 50,000 feet altitude the airplane that Maverick was flying or testing, experimenting, and he goes even higher altitude and even higher Mach numbers. And
Mach 10, more than Mach 10.
Yeah, so that is for experimental pilots, people who experiment new technology and new airplanes and all that. Don't experiment with a Cessna. Do not.
The wing
Not
will
even
fall
any
off.
commercial airplane that you fly in
Its
an airline.
limitations are well laid out on the POH, okay, Pilot Operating Handbook. You exceed those, that is
A violation.
a violation and more like an invitation of death for the occupant and the people on ground.
Yes.
Don't even do that in any airline.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
it will lead to structural damage. So if there is nothing visible on the structure, but the structure would be already damaged, and the person who is flying after you may face the consequences, or you yourself may face the consequences.
Absolutely. Yeah. So do not try to exceed those limitations. Okay, let's just list down hazardous attitudes for pilots so that you have a reference in your pilot training. Okay, it's anti-authority. Don't tell me what to do. That is an example of anti-authority. If you think that you are thinking like that, then the antidote would be follow the rules. They are usually right.
Yes.
Absolutely,
Follow the limitations, follow the rules. Humans have their limitations. Okay, don't try to go without oxygen above 12,000 feet for way too long. It's easy to get hypoxic at those. Okay, so human limitations and the technological limitations and the machinery limitations, consider those. Legal limitations, consider those and fly accordingly. Okay, that is anti-authority. Impulsivity, do it quickly, do it without thinking, just go for it. Okay, try to not do it. think not so fast. Okay, basically not so fast, think first and do it. Okay, whatever your action is, what are gonna be the consequences. Again, there is a counter to it, that as Capt.Neha said, the Middle Eastern, Far Eastern airline.
And Far
Yeah,
Eastern
so that is
airlines.
a type of thinking, that is overthinking, that can I do it. Okay, if you have been trained to do it, if you have the knowledge to do it, if you are legal to do it, yeah, then overthinking is also not the way, right? So there needs to be a balance of those things, right? Now third, you already explained, so let's invulnerability.
Yeah, invulnerability, like it won't happen to me. The antidote for it would be, it can happen to me. You have to be ready to handle any situation that might come during your
Absolutely.
flight or post-flight for that matter.
Correct.
And then we discussed about the macho attitude, that if a person is has done certain things and is low on experience, but he does a good landing, then he is very confident about it. Okay, so that would lead to overconfidence and can lead them into doing things which they are not capable of doing, and would end up affecting the safety of the aircraft. Okay,
Absolutely.
So
and also macho attitude can also be influenced by, say someone has flown 50 hours and now has the motor skills to fly the airplane, can land the airplane good, and nothing wrong has happened until this point of time. The pilot feels this is how flying is. This is how things work. Okay.
Until first time he gets something.
One thing goes wrong, and that whole confidence deflates, that anything can go wrong, right? So, so at that point, the experience is very low, as Chintan rightly said, and confidence is very high. So if you see that happening, the experience and confidence void increasing, then actually before anything goes wrong, nothing has to go wrong for you to be aware of that difference and bring it to a balance, right?
Yes, so do what you are supposed to do in the cockpit rather than being complacent that this cannot happen.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like for example, we as airline pilots do a safety briefing before every flight.
Yes.
So safety briefing is, what if there is a reject takeoff because of any malfunction that occurs during the takeoff roll. So we brief that before every flight, though out of thousands of flights in our entire career, it could happen maybe once. But that time, we should be so prompt in taking an action. That can happen if we have briefed well.
Correct.
Yes, that is true.
In so many hours of my flying more than 5,000, I have had one reject takeoff.
Correct.
But that was at such point, I was up the whole night. It was a red-eye flight. It was then flying from, getting out of Delhi, and then there is engine not spooling up, or so those things because of which there is a requirement to reject the takeoff. So the action should be so prompt that you are able to take it correctly, well in time, and then get the aircraft safely back to its bay. So
that reminds me of my instructor who used to instruct me during my solo building hours. Okay, so when we go for a solo flight, okay, there is nothing much when we are up in the air. Once we are on the route, right? So we just scan the cockpit. Okay, so what he taught me was, okay, you are scanning the cockpit. That is good. Okay, but now every 5 to 10 minutes you should be aware about your position.
If the engine quits now.
If the engine quits, okay. So what you will be doing if your engine quits now? You should have the location of the nearest airports where you are going to land. You should know the frequency so that you are ready when the engine
What's your glide
quits.
distance? What's your altitude? How long you can go without the engine? If the prop stops, then how long you can glide at every point of time if you have that.
Especially in case of single engine airplane.
Yes, definitely. And you are flying solo, so you don't have much time if the engine quits, right? So that is the proper example of invulnerability, that the engine fails, right? It can happen to you as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Like if you have the glide distance calculated, say every 10 minutes interval or something, that's great. And especially on a single engine airplane, because If that engine quits, it's only the glide distance and altitude that's gonna save the person, right?
Yes.
And if at all, I would not wish this for the worst enemy of mine, but if at all someone's prop stops, okay, then overthinking at that point of time is definitely not the way to go. At that point of time, just get things together, get it together, okay? You already have been trained for this, okay? You are not going solo unless you have been trained for
the
this,
emergency
right?
lessons,
Okay,
yeah.
at that point, there is another basically personality trait or hazardous attitude that a pilot might experience. Now, that brings us to another hazardous attitude that a pilot might experience, and it is very important to be self-aware at that point that, all right, this is doomed. This is it. Just talk the last words and let the ship sink. Okay,
No,
that is
that's
called resignation. Yeah, so that is the last hazardous attitude that will speak in this podcast. There is so much more to this. Okay, this is
Absolutely.
a very detailed topic. It's
Correct.
pilot psychometry and pilot behavior, pilot personality. This is extremely vast topic and extremely detailed topic.
Correct,
There are
correct.
a lot many things that she can continue on going for, and we can keep on talking about. But we'll keep it concise so that it is understandable to you, okay? And try to integrate these changes in day-to-day behavior, not only in let's say cockpit, but also in day-to-day behavior, right?
Absolutely.
So resignation,
So
coming
you
back to
can't
the
give up.
topic of resignation, yeah. A pilot doesn't give up until the pilot touches the ground.
So it means pilot cannot give up in any kind of abnormal or any emergency situation. So let the situation be anything as abnormal, or it could be an emergency. As a pilot, it is very important. You just take a small breath,
Yeah.
just calm yourself, gather all the information that you have gained till now,
Yeah.
and then follow those steps.
Yeah, correct.
For pilots, it is already laid down in such simplified manner that
Correct.
any abnormal situation, either, let's say, if it is time critical,
Correct.
then there are certain memory items
Correct.
which you have to apply.
Correct.
Just take a small pause and immediately apply those from
Correct.
memory, which are like few of them depending on the aircraft type. There could be maybe 10 or there could be 20 or 25, whatever,
Correct.
depending on the aircraft type. Those are called as memory items.
Correct.
So that you can apply. Like for example, if there is another aircraft in close proximity, then you have to apply TCAS,
Correct.
memory item.
Correct.
Then if in case there is, terrain coming close to you, then you
Correct.
have to apply another. So things like that, or
Yeah.
wind shear, all those
Yeah.
things. Now, if in case there is something which is not so time critical, then you have a checklist to follow.
Sure.
Obviously, there is nothing to be done because so many systems are there, so many abnormal
Correct.
situations could
Correct.
occur.
Correct.
It is not humanly possible, and it is a
Correct.
limitation of a human being to memorize all those things and to reproduce them at that emergency situation when you are already at that panic state. So you don't have to panic, you have to calm yourself down and then follow those steps without missing out even a single
Right.
procedure.
Right. Yeah, so when we speak about human factors, okay, physical limitations is one, but this is also another part of human factors, right? Which
Yes.
relates a lot to decision making, relates a lot to crew resource management,
Absolutely.
hazardous attitudes. It's extremely detailed topic and it's vast, okay? But we're just taking this on, like brushing the surface so that you understand and start working on those areas, right?
Yes. And as you discussed about the emergency, like when the prop stops, okay? So
Yeah.
that was the question most of the aspiring pilots would ask me before becoming a pilot. So eventually, if a person has not flown a plane, okay, so
Correct.
that would be the first question. Like, what if the plane stops? Then what do we do? Okay, so
Engine
as you
stops.
correctly
Engine stops.
yes, as you correctly said, engine stops. So I would just like to discuss like the emergency procedure so that they would know okay it's safe and we are trained for it, right?
Yeah.
So basically, when you see there's any malfunction with the engine or the engine stops, so basically first what we do is we adjust our airspeed so that
VG, which is
glide
best.
speed.
Yeah.
Yes. So we cover the maximum distance and then we look for the best airfield to land. So if we are aware about the situation, we
Correct.
would know which is the closest airport.
Definitely.
And then we follow our emergency checklist and then declare the emergency. And
Sure.
we are trained for it, okay?
Yeah.
So once the engine quits, we won't panic, oh, what has happened, okay? Okay, it's failed, okay? So now let's do the procedures.
Yeah.
Correct,
Right?
correct,
And
correct,
that's
correct.
how we handle the situations.
Yeah.
That's how there are steps.
Yes.
Fly, navigate, communicate.
Yes.
So that is the Airbus,
Yeah.
philosophy.
This
and
was
these
aviate,
steps.
navigate,
That
communicate.
is for
Or if in
Boeing.
case of Boeing, they call it as aviate, navigate,
Navigate,
communicate.
communicate.
So basically, it's one and the same
Mhm.
thing. Just two companies are putting that in a
Yeah.
different way.
Because
So-
they don't want to have anything in common in
Yeah.
between.
So first fly the plane when there is any kind of an abnormal situation.
Mhm.
Things are okay, under control, aircraft is flying safe.
Mhm.
Then navigate, see where you are,
Correct.
whether which is the closest one, where you
Yeah.
are going in the correct direction.
Sure.
Then is communication then with other crew member or communication with ATC, all those things.
Until this
Then-
point, what we have been trained is aviate, navigate, communicate. So now we will be trained to reterm it as fly, navigate, communicate. It
Yes.
is one and the same, actually. Yeah. So if you are extremely biased towards Boeing, then say aviate, navigate, communicate.
Why do you?
And if you are extremely biased towards Airbus, which she definitely is, you can see that. then say fly, navigate, communicate. But if you are flying a specific airplane, then use its own terminology. That is so.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it is for resignation, because if you resign, not resign meaning company resign, but if you resign from the situation or the circumstances or the emergency, that equates to resigning from life, right? So don't do it.
Yeah. So these are the 5 hazardous attitudes.
These are just to simplify and put it in easier terms. It's in
Yes.
it's in FA literature, FA all the documents that are there for FA. They mention these 5 hazardous attitudes. But if we wanna go into detail of pilots' behavior and pilots' personality traits, there is a lot more to it. Especially more attention was paid to this after the Germanwings crash, correct? Like all
Yes. Then most airlines started conducting psychometry tests for all aspiring pilots who are willing to join an airline.
Correct.
So in our entire pilot recruitment process, this step has become one additional step,
Correct.
which is personality test or aptitude test, whatever you call it as.
Correct.
So that's how it is. So many
And,
like-
and just as a disclaimer, this is not a replacement for any kind of clinical psychology consultation or anything. Okay, this is not, because as we are speaking about psychology, there can be someone that has clinical psychological conditions if anyone is.
These are certain traits which a ideal pilot should possess, and if any trainee pilot is willing to become a pilot, then they should try to adopt these traits
Absolutely.
in them.
Yes.
That is-
Basically, if a person has to make a decision, the hazardous attitude should not affect the decision making of a
Yes,
person. Ensure.
that's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, so
Okay.
yeah, like we spoke about Germanwings straight up, but what is Germanwings? What happened in Germanwings exactly?
Yes, so in Germanwings crash, which happened in the year 2015, that time there was the first officer was under influence of some drugs, because drugs as an under medication
Antidepressants, yeah.
of antidepressant, because he had personal issues because of which he was under depression. And because the doctors he visited back then, as per the laws in Europe, so because of
Privacy
that,
laws,
privacy laws, or to prevent any information of his own, which is personal information, to be revealed. So because of that information was only enclosed with the doctors.
Okay.
So that was
not disclosed to
not-
the company, employer, or authorities. Right?
Yes. And because of that, when he was suffering from that depression, he had a suicidal tendency developed. And that continued to grow. And eventually, one fine day, when he had that tendency, he went on a flight. And when captain visited a lavatory that time, he locked the cockpit door from inside and did not let captain enter the cockpit. And in meantime, he took the plane into the mountains and went down and crashed into mountains.
So it was on purpose, right?
It was on purpose, which took lives of everybody on board. So this is a very lethal and very dangerous and hazardous attitude. Yeah, because of this psychological condition, so many lives of passengers was taken because of that. So
Yeah, so if someone has those psychological conditions, then that person needs to immediately seek help. And suicidal tendency is definitely not something that is acceptable in aviation, right?
absolutely.
All right, I think that's it for psychology. Now we'll go for type rating, right?
Yes.
So
Awesome.
So everything, I would say.
time
be
for
ready.
autopilot, not
Time to
flight.
switch on the autopilots and fry the aircraft.
Yes, so let's talk about more of autopilot.
Yeah, so it's a talk of the town that pilots don't do anything. They just switch on autopilots and they get paid for pressing the button of autopilot, one button, and then 10 lakh rupees. That is the button to get 10 lakh rupees salary
Press
every
10
month.
lakh credited
Yeah.
in your account.
No,
Yeah.
that is not
So press
the case.
autopilot, credited 10 lakhs.
No. That is not how it goes. So let's take an example, like when you were flying Cessna or Diamond,
Yes.
whatever. Okay, you would be flying for 1 hour, 1.5 hour.
Yes,
Okay.
maximum 2 to 3 hours during
there
training.
would be basic type of autopilot which would be there, maybe to just maintain heading,
Yes.
something like that,
Yeah,
right?
which
Just to
we weren't
maintain
allowed to use.
heading. So
Yeah.
whatever. So you done that,
Correct.
and maybe you've done that for some time.
Correct.
Whenever you are on a cross country, because it is not monitored, that who would see whether you have, switched that.
Well, we were
heading.
legal to use autopilot. We were
Huh.
not allowed to use
Who
autopilot.
said that?
Yeah, we were not allowed to use, I guess.
No, I have used autopilot.
Huh.
If there was, who said we were not allowed to
We
use
were
autopilot?
not. The circuit breakers would be pulled out and it would be tied.
No, then there, if so that uniform airplane, right?
5122 uniform.
5122 uniform. So 5122 uniform used to have autopilot functional sometimes and non-functional sometimes. So, like.
Instead of maybe
So if the CB is out, then obviously we can't use it. But if the CB was in, I've used it a couple of times. Like
Yeah.
I mean, during cross countries we could use, but during the training lessons we couldn't
sure.
use.
So the instructors won't let
Let
us
us
do
use.
it.
Yeah. So basically, in your training flights, when you were trained under instructor, that time you may not have used, but when you were doing a PIC cross country and you were building hours,
Yeah.
you might have used the basic mode of autopilot, which is
Yes.
maintaining a heading.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
let's say.
Yes.
Altitude.
Now, maintaining
Heading and
altitude, and then if you have to maintain altitude and the heading, these two
Yeah.
combinations. Okay.
Yeah.
But for speed, you will have to move thrust
Correct.
lever or
Yes.
throttle.
Yes.
If for
Yes.
small
Sure.
airplanes, we call it throttle. Okay.
Yeah.
So now, when this is like basic mode. Now, if you imagine airline
It's
pilots.
not only small airplanes. Boeing also calls it throttle.
which is Airbus.
So anyway, so let's say for commercial airplanes, now we have to fly from Mumbai to Dubai, for example, okay, which is about 3 hours flight, okay. Now when we fly there, let's say if we just fly manually all the way,
Yeah.
okay. Now just flying manually in a cruise, which is a less workload time, that time if you continue to fly, you are stressing yourself.
Correct.
Eventually when you go to Dubai, let's say you go in the middle of the night where there is more traffic. In Dubai there are stars, which is standard instrument arrival, okay. In arrival there are a lot of constraints which have to be met. For altitude you have to be
Correct.
below certain altitude, you have to
Correct.
be at certain speed. So those things also need to be maintained, which
Yeah.
is possible to be done, but there is a lot of communication which has to be done. There is so much traffic. You have to maintain a particular rate of descent itself. If you exceed it, there is a possibility of TCAS TA, which you need to avoid it. You cannot let that happen.
Correct.
So all those things you have to focus on. So just barely flying can
Yeah.
be done by autopilot.
Yeah.
So
the-
giving commands to the autopilot can be done by us, and just merely flying part can
So-
be performed by automation. So there is a good synergy required
Correct.
to fly that airplane depending on your sector length. Let's say you fly to a place, let's say from here to Vadodara or
Correct.
here to any small city where there is less traffic. Now you can just disconnect autopilot, you can fly a visual circuit and
Correct.
land. So you have skill to, you can still polish your skill of flying an airplane manually.
Yeah.
Continue to do that. You
Yeah.
keep your skill polished because of flying
Absolutely.
manually.
Correct.
And where required, you need to use autopilot,
Yeah.
like when you go to Dubai
Sure.
or places where there is dense traffic, where
Yeah.
you need to monitor many things other than just flying. So at those places, there has to be a collect decision
Correct.
taken by a pilot that whether you need to use automation or you can fly manually. So that way you can keep your skills polished and you can fly the aircraft safely.
Correct. Absolutely.
So
So, and also with the level of traffic that there is in the skies in today's date, the workload is a lot,
It's a lot.
especially at the time of departure
Yes,
and
absolutely.
at the time of arrival. Correct. In that, adding a motor job as in flying is a motor skill, right?
Correct,
so
correct.
so holding the controls and flying at the same time, doing all those other things such as avoiding traffic, following to ATC instructions, alongside maintaining the altitude, alongside maintaining the heading, alongside speed, all of these things. In today's date, that'll take away from the safety of the conduct of the flight,
Yes,
right?
yes. So autopilot is required to an extent where you think that you can, workload is less, you can fly manually.
Correct.
No one stops you from
But
doing that. Okay, like
does
not throughout
anybody-
the route.
Yeah.
But in a cruise, there are certain requirements. Like if you fly in RVSM airspace, that is reduced vertical
Correct.
separation minima, where the separation between two reciprocal traffic is just 1,000 feet. There, you have to mandatorily switch on the autopilot.
Correct.
You cannot fly manually. So above 29,000 feet, which is RVSM airspace, automation is must.
Yeah.
So there
So
is
RVSM, have you seen in those Instagram reels and stuff, the airplane flies above you and then there is another airplane that is going underneath you. That is RVSM, okay? That is reduced vertical separation minima.
just
Right.
1,000 feet separation between reciprocal tracks.
Right.
So
right.
that is RVSM. So above 29,000 feet.
Correct.
If in case all the aircrafts are equipped with certain equipments, one of them is autopilot, okay, which is automatic altitude keeping devices,
Yeah.
autopilot.
Yeah.
So in that case, the RVSM approval. Apart from that, there are many other equipments also required, but this is one of them.
Correct.
So it's not like if autopilot is something which is just, pilot would switch it on and then do nothing.
Yeah.
There are many other things
Correct.
which go behind, apart from just flying.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
But using autopilot excessively at places where you need not and where you can fly manually, that actually reduces pilots' handling capabilities to hand fly the plane.
Correct.
So that also should not happen.
So is
So
there
this
any
is one of the drawbacks.
Is there any norm that you have to do hand flying like certain amount of time for a month or like that?
So because of excessive use of automation, for first officers every 6 months, there is a hand flying in a simulator, which is given mandatorily.
The raw data, right?
The raw data practice for about half an hour.
So now there's a provision to Autoland and auto taxi. So does it make a pilot's life easier?
So auto taxi hasn't come yet to many airplane fleet. Like not many aircrafts, like 320 doesn't have it yet. And even Autoland we use in certain situations like low visibility operations, where pilot cannot visually see the runway and visibility is very low. Low in the sense, I would say, whenever RVR, or to tell you in very simple terms, it is runway visual range, which is exact visibility in approach direction. That is the visibility which pilot will be able to see when you are on the approach to land.
Yeah.
So if it is less than 550 meters, then auto land is advisable. Okay. If it goes to less than 300 meters, then you have to mandatorily do auto land. Okay. So that is a situation which is in case of winter. Visibility goes down because of fog in North India and many other places because of various reasons. In that case, Autoland is required, but otherwise, Autoland is not something which we do on a very regular basis. For that, there is a special training required on a simulator for Cat 2, Cat 3. Thereafter, aircraft should be, Cat 2, Cat 3 equipped. As well as pilots. Both pilots should be Cat 2, Cat 3 qualified. LVP, low visibility procedures, should be in force at airport. And all those things are to be met.
She just used the term RVR, runway visual range. Okay, listen to this carefully. RVR is measured by transmissometer. This will get you 2 marks in the DGCA exams. Okay. Thank me. Okay, you are welcome. This is something that will get you 2 marks in the DGCA exams meteorology paper.
RVR is measured by transmissometer.
Transmissometer.
Yeah. So that's.
So if you have the exams, good luck. Okay.
Yes, I think exams are
exams are there now.
next week.
Next 10 days,
Next
14th
week.
and 15th March is exam for regular attempt in 2023.
Correct. I hope this episode is published before 14th and 15th March.
Yes, this episode will be published by 9th of March.
Yeah. Today is
4th of March.
4th of March as we shoot this.
Yes. Yeah. That's it, I would say, for this podcast.
So no, this is not it. We are just going on a long podcast today. So if this happens to be close to 2 hours, okay, we'll split it into 2 parts, okay, and the next part will come in the next week, okay. So we were on autopilots, right? So autopilot and pilot, the synchronity between autopilot and pilot, why autopilot is required, all of that, right? Then another question is that full automation of flying. So and viability of it, and feasibility of it, feasibility and viability of fully automated flights, right? So is it possible in today's date, or it is not? there are aircraft manufacturers that say that fully automated flight, fully autonomous flights are possible. Pilotless flights are possible. So what is your view on that? So first of all, as we close the topic of autopilot and pilot, see, the salaries that pilots get, 60-70% of that salary is not for the routine flying, but for handling the emergencies. As she mentioned that if she would have done thousands, if not tens of thousands takeoffs until now, okay, thousands of takeoffs until now, right?
More than that.
More than that, tens of thousands probably. Those take,
I mean, okay, average thousand, okay, thousands, okay, multiple thousands.
Yeah, as she said that she would have done thousands of takeoff until now. One takeoff that required a reject takeoff, right? Abort takeoff, reject takeoff. That is where that salary is justified, right?
Absolutely.
60 to 70% part of pilot salaries is for being able to handle emergencies. What is the value of 180 to 230 occupants of an airplane of their life, right? What is the value of life of 230 occupants of the airplane?
Invaluable.
Yeah, that is you can't measure
Measure it in
value of
numbers.
human life, right?
Yeah.
So that is the compensation of a pilot, and remaining 40% is for the routine flying that pilots do. Sure, pilots do use autopilot while flying, but that is to aid safety to flight operations.
Absolutely.
That is for that purpose.
Absolutely.
The decision maker is the pilot. The decision maker is not the autopilot. Autopilot doesn't make decisions.
Absolutely.
Right now, autopilot executes. The decision making is completely done by the pilot, and that decision making is backed by the training that the pilot has been given. Correct?
Absolutely.
The knowledge, training, experience, all of these things that facilitate the pilot to be able to make decisions in the cockpit.
There are certain tools of our decision making, like
frameworks
for example, we use certain tool like
sorry.
Whenever I say
good. Tools of decision making.
Like decision making and decision reinforcing tools. Like we make it based on certain facts. Okay.
Correct.
So facts. What are the facts? Like for example, fact related to what is the abnormal procedure, what is the abnormal situation. Okay. Then what is the aircraft status at that point of time, whether it is time critical, and what all, whether that particular fact related to weather, fact related to NOTAMs, fact related to operational requirements. Okay, those are the facts. Like for example, if there is a fire, then what is the minimum fire capability that airport should have in order to land there. Okay, because for every particular aircraft type there is minimum firefighting capability that airport should be able to handle. Okay, like bigger aircraft 747 cannot go and land into a smaller airport, and they cannot handle fire that. Okay,
fire,
so basically,
and then
or
even the pavement classification
like that.
number.
There are many other things. So
yeah.
that comes under facts. Then options. What are the different options at that point? Whether you can go to X airport or Y airport. And then what is the, again you have to check the NOTAMs of those airports. Then what is the risk involved in doing that? What you are thinking of doing it. What is the risk involved in that? Because no operation is risk-free operation. If you want to be risk-free, be at home, sleep. That is risk-free.
That is also
okay. So that's what. So no operation is risk-free. There is always certain amount of risk involved in every operation. Okay. So thereafter, based on these things, you may come to a decision with mutual, agreement of both crew members, and thereafter execute it. So you need to inform ATC, you need to inform
Mhm.
passengers,
Mhm.
cabin crew,
Mhm.
and then brief them about what is going to happen next, where are we going to land, in how
Correct.
much time we are going
In
to
case
land,
of divergence, right?
whether
Mhm.
we
Yeah.
need any emergency
Yeah.
evacuation or
Yeah.
not, and those things. And
Correct.
thereafter keep checking whether you are doing it in the right way.
Correct.
So these are certain tools with which
For
we
sure. Yeah.
come
The
to a
decision-making
conclusion,
framework, right?
decision-making. Yeah,
Now-
you will
yeah.
learn it.
Yeah.
These are a standard decision-making tools which many CRM books will have.
Correct.
But every airline would choose one of them which suits them
Yeah.
the best.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
Yeah, the idea is to keep safety at
Absolutely.
paramount, right? No, for sure. Now, as we discussed about autopilot, okay, then we spoke about decision making. So there is a difference between autonomous flight and airplanes having autopilots, okay? Back in time, say 60s, okay, 1960s, there was no autopilot, correct? The engine would be required to start it manually, all the steam gauges, okay, and that was very challenging. So cockpit required how many? 3-4 persons. So flight
yes.
engineer, navigator, then
Captain and first
captain and first
officer.
officer. So navigator would do the job of MFD, navigation display.
Yeah,
right?
basically the entire MCDU, FMS,
Mhm,
when there was
mhm.
no flight management
Mhm.
system. That time navigator used to do all nav log.
Correct.
How much would be estimated fuel at that point? How much would be the estimated time
Correct.
of arrival at every waypoint on entire route?
Correct.
They give you the
Then-
heading to fly.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thereafter, there used to be very old way of navigation like INS, which
Correct.
that used to give heading to fly. Then
Inertial
there was
navigation
a
system.
point to point navigation also
Correct.
from VOR to VOR.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that used to be a longer route,
Correct.
and then there didn't used to be
So
many
even
VOR.
before VOR, it would
Mm.
be just the dead reckoning, right?
Yeah,
So-
that would be quite challenging.
Correct.
So there was a lot of possibility of getting lost and then
Correct.
entering in other
Yeah.
countries' airspace.
Correct.
And those things
So-
have happened because of
So
which.
speaking of the longer timeline of this, right? Then there was a flight engineer as well, right?
Yes,
Flight
yes,
engineer
yes.
who would see the engines and
Because
everything
there used to be everything used to be only in manuals.
Manuals,
There
yeah.
was nothing digitalized on the
Yeah,
display.
yeah.
Mhm.
Now, if there is any abnormal procedure in Airbus, you will have a checklist
Correct,
on your display.
correct.
That is on engine warning display.
So if we speak about a longer timeline, say 100 to 150 years, 1903 aviation started. Let's say about 2050. Okay. Now we are at 2022. Okay. In this time, what has happened over a period of time? When back in 1960s, 50s, everything was manual. Then the flight engineers were not required in cockpit. Then the navigators were not required in cockpit because those jobs were automated by technology, right?
Of
Mhm.
FMS.
Those jobs were not required because those were automated by technology. Now we are at a point where decision making is not yet automated, but flying, just
Is automated.
manual flying is automated.
Correct.
Give it 30 years more, sure, the decision making could also be automated eventually, but then it requires supply of information to the technology that will be there in future
Mhm.
on real time basis, because pilots make decisions on information received in real time.
Absolutely.
So if the ATC provides information that so and so airport is closed, pilots would plan for another alternate instead of that alternate, right?
Correct.
So as of now, flying might have been automated, but decision making has not been automated. So that will take about 30 years, 20 years. Another point from the consumer perspective that will be there is to put yourself in an airplane that has no
Yes.
humans on board, that is very less likely in today's date and time. At least
Correct.
if we consider sitting in 2023, right? That is very less likely.
Correct.
Maybe 20, 30 years, maybe people will be able to be okay with not having pilots in the cockpit. So pilot-less cockpits, I would say that is not to be seen for at least 25, 30 years from
Yes,
now.
and speaking about the automation, okay, so there has to be a lot of research done. There has to be a lot of infrastructure which has to be built so that the plane can land automatically without a pilot, right?
Correct.
And to develop that, to do the research, trial and error, it
Correct.
would take a significant amount of time.
Correct.
Okay, but the technology nowadays is very advanced,
Yeah.
right?
Correct,
If you are seeing the AI and stuff
Sure.
like taking over the internet,
Yeah.
so you never know, but we still have time. As long as the aircraft manufacturers have
Yeah.
their aircraft, they would be required.
Yeah.
They will be requiring the pilots.
Yeah. But artificial intelligence right now is okay to have fun with, but is not at a level where you can risk human lives upon.
Definitely.
Right? Artificial intelligence is good and is a very good tool, but it's not something that could be put trust upon so much that you would risk thousands or millions of lives upon, right? As of now, it is not at that stage. So that will take some time to develop, and at least I would say that 25 years, 30 years from now, pilots aren't losing jobs. That's just my view about this, right? So like navigators and engineers lost their job. So what was the technology that replaced them?
It is flight management system, which is FMS, which has the integration of technical database and navigation database.
Correct.
So it has the aircraft technical database with respect to what is the fuel consumption, what is the aircraft CG and those things computation will be taken care by FMS, and it has a navigation database which changes every 28 days. So that navigation database is uploaded by engineers to FMS, and that option to select the current database is there, which pilot has to do.
Correct.
And then that navigation database will have the database of all the airports, airways, its constraints, SIDs, departures, stars, that is arrivals, instrument arrivals, all runways, etc.
The GPS
So-
database as well. Right.
Yeah, the GPS constellation database. So all that is there in navigation database.
Correct.
So because of that, there is already flight management system in an airplane, because of which from Airbus 300, which was the first airplane on which FMS was installed, and then there was no requirement of navigators and flight engineers
Correct.
on board the aircraft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there, have you heard about the single crew cockpit, which is the term used nowadays? That they don't want two pilots, like the aircraft agencies are planning to design the cockpit in such a way that one pilot is enough to manage the whole cockpit.
Yeah, sure, but then again, we are betting lives on health or health condition of one person. If that one person goes away, it happens in pilot incapacitation happens during the flight. So one person's health is gone whilst in flight, meaning, does that mean 180 persons die? Well, that is a lot of risk if we speak about it.
Yeah.
So that risk is actually way too reduced by having two persons in a cockpit. Definitely, but for a multi-crew cockpit, to be structured in a way for it to be operated by one person is very difficult. Like if we speak about modern airplanes that are being manufactured right now, that have been placed orders for, those are two crew cockpits.
Two crew cockpits, yes.
Right? those are not gonna be able to be handled by one single crew. So the airplane that you fly right now, Airbus A320, could it be flown solo?
No, it's a two-crew cockpit. There is a requirement of both crew members, and there is a task sharing, which is PF, PM,
Okay.
and then that way the entire flight is executed.
Correct. And in case of incapacitation,
In case of incapacitation, yes, one pilot can do the job. But again, if there is an abnormal situation, then again there is a requirement of other crew member to do the things like handling ECAM and then doing the procedures which are laid down in it.
correct.
Yeah.
So if there is an incapacitation of a crew member and there is a flight emergency at the same time,
That can happen.
well, anything can happen, right? So that is what the simulator trainings are for, right? That is what
Yeah, like, see, if you have to put one under pressure, then you can give that person any number of emergencies. Okay. So this is what we get in our command assessment checks.
correct.
Okay, give him everything. Incapacitation also, all sorts of emergencies also now handle.
Yeah. Hey, if you
That's
wanna
great.
watch a movie that really will help you in pilot career, Sully is a very good movie, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's something. I mean, that adheres to commercial pilots' life a lot, and it can help to watch that movie. So watch Sully, and I think we had a long podcast. Thank you for joining us. Okay, if you are an aspiring pilot or you are a CPL holder, good luck. Okay, if you are an aspiring pilot, sign up for CNTAA If you are a CPL holder and looking to get into airlines, you can join us for preparation or revision of your syllabus that can be asked and that will be asked in your airline assessment. So good luck with that. You can definitely enroll into CNTAA for the preparation.
Yes.
And we'll make sure to provide you with all the knowledge that is required for these assessments.
Absolutely.
And good luck.
Wish you all the best for your pilot career.
Okay.
Yes, and if you are someone who is about to clear their 12th exam, so in a week or two, your 12th exam might be ending. So if you are someone who is looking to become a pilot, as soon as you are done with your 12th exam, you can sign up on CNTAA. You can drop us a message and we'll get in touch with you shortly and guide you for your pilot training.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for watching.
Thank you
Have
for
a good day.
watching a
Yeah.
long
Thank you.
podcast.
At CNTAA, Capt.Neha is the head of training. So she looks after your training for everything. So be sure that you will be in good hands. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Subscribe,
much.
like.
Sure.
Yeah.
We are the fun